Recently, someone asked what they could do if they had to jack a beam up or lift something up using a post and a hydraulic jack or screw jack, something like that. If they had a wood floor, and this would also apply if you had a tile floor, I think you could do something like this. No guarantees, mind you, just kind of throwing out some ideas. I think you could simply grab a 4x12 if it wasn't going to be something too heavy. Grab a 4x12, put it down like this. And I think if you needed a little more support, you could always stack one or two above this. You know, you could stack a few up. I think that would distribute the weight a little more evenly. I think something like this, the load is going to concentrate around this area. Let's just say it goes out at a 45-degree angle. Then you're not going to have very much here. If you put another board on top of this, then I think you're going to have a little more. And then, of course, working your way up. I mean, if we had stacked 3 boards up to here and this was the bottom of the jack, I think we would have something like this that the load would be distributed on. But another thing you would need to do, too, is if you were jacking it up, you'd need to jack it up slowly, but this is no guarantee. You know, you're going to be listening for some creaks and cracks. You hear something like that, back off. If you are worried, and of course, this is what I'm talking about, using a post to lift something heavy up, like a beam, roof truss, something like that, roof rafter. You know, this is what you'd be doing to give you an overview. But I think something like this might provide you with a little more support if you were going to put a 4x12 or a 4x10 on the bottom and then center it, put another 4x10 on edge. This would act like a floor joist, kind of act like a structural support with a concentrated load. If you think about floor framing, if they have a concentrated load, you can actually put a concentrated load on a beam like this because the weight is going to transfer out to the edges more, and something like this that would actually transfer through. Make sure that the beam that you put on edge is actually crowned up. If you have, just look down the beam, most of them aren't perfectly straight. If it's perfectly straight, it's not going to matter. You can simply set the beam on one side and look for gaps. If you have a gap in the middle, then you might want to turn the beam over. And then if you have, if you have a gap in the middle, you're going to be fine. I'm sorry. If you have gaps on the edges, let's just say it's crowned down, then you might want to flip the beam over. So a gap in the middle would be good because that's going to basically, you're going to put some pressure on this and it's going to transfer it evenly a little better. If you have a large gap in the center, you might want to put some shims underneath it because I think something like this is going to work better as a solid unit. So, if you had a beam with a large crown in it and you had a half-inch gap between the top of the board on the bottom here and the bottom of the beam on edge, you might just want to slide some plywood shims in there so that the load is more evenly distributed. Otherwise, you could end up having all of the load concentrated on these 2 points here, which that wouldn't be good. So hope all that makes sense. If you don't have a tiled floor, it's not finished, you could always put a 2x10, 2x12, something like this down. This is going to be better than simply putting the jack on the floor, especially for heavier loads. And of course, you can always use larger lumber. It's not always going to be a good idea to put the jack on top of the subflooring, OSB, plywood, something like that, even if you don't have it finished with tile or wood flooring, carpeting, something like that. It's always going to be better to have something like this. That way you're just not putting the load on the plywood, the subflooring itself, because you could end up damaging the subflooring. So always put a block in there. I think that's always going to be a good idea to do something like this, no matter what you're doing when you're lifting something up. Obviously, you wouldn't need it if you're just lifting something up that weighs 25 pounds. But if you're trying to raise something like a beam or trying to raise a floor, then you might need to do something like this for sure. Now, don't be afraid also to grab other jacks. If you have a load, you could distribute the load through the floor by setting something like this up in multiple places. You could have something here, move it over 12 inches, do the same setup again, and then use 3 jacks simultaneously to lift the beam. The main thing is just not to concentrate a load in a small area like this. You're going to want to distribute it as much as you can and as far out as you can. So I hope this helps. And if you end up jacking the floor up and you hear some creaks and cracks, like I said, you're probably going to have to go to another plan.